back and bigger than ever. It's the unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carrie, Josh, Eddie, and Bob.
All right, we are back for another edition of the unofficial 40 podcast right here from Soonerscoop.com. The entire crew back in action. Josh McCuistion, Eddie Radosevich, Bob Prisbillo, and I am your host, Carrie Murdoch. As a lot of things to get to. Oklahoma spring game coming up this weekend. We got a little bit of a preview action for you on this episode. Also, arrests or potential arrest or criminal activity. Is it in Norman? I feel like I'm Eddie's college,
I didn't
prostitution ring.
I probably need to break out the detective work, the sleuth work. I mean, I get a dog too. Should have opened
a plaid jacket.
Should have opened with a little, maybe some sirens. Maybe we could put that in post.
We could do that.
Like a little. Boo,
what's on the police scanner today? Surprisingly,
you got to know the ways of the scanner quite well over the weekend. It sounds like.
I'm very lucky that I have all kinds of software where I can just fast forward through the silences. But, there was a lot of... So what it was is you can actually go and get archived... I didn't know this. You can get archived police scanner records.
I had no idea that you could do that.
And someone had alerted me to it. You have to pay for it. But I went and got the Thursday night police scanner, and let's face it, let's just dive head first into this whole thing.
I'd never be able to be a cop because I can never understand what people are saying on a walkie-talkie.
It's really hard, and then you have to know all those codes.
That has to be the hardest part.
Like, I was trying to learn, because there's certain names for letters.
Sure, not make any jokes too.
It's like, if I spell out my name, it's like Charles, Adam, was it R? Right. I think Robert, Edward. I think E is Ed, or Ed. Yeah, Edward is the E. Y is young. So it's like, if you're a cop and you hear those words, you're thinking letters, which it's very, but they didn't say like, Tony, Robert, Edward for Trajan Bridges. I mean, they just said his name.
Sure.
So anyway, there's all kinds of weird stuff you have to get through. And then there's, people passing out and people having seizures. And there was an old lady that got stuck, that fell in her house. And so there was a hazmat spill like on Highway 9 at one point.
God.
So it's all this stuff that you have to wade through. And they don't always say people's names and stuff, but they were saying openly Trajan Bridges' name and Seth McGowan's name on the scanners.
It's better look for the university than going by their football uniform numbers, right?
I mean, the best part though is just thinking about like Lincoln. See, now this is what I was told, is that Benny Wiley is the point man on all this. So if a player gets in trouble, the cops need to get a hold of OU, they call Benny Wiley. And then I don't know if they the wolf comes out after that or how that goes down. But it sets things into motion. So at one point on the scanner, they were like, they called the university trying to get Trajan Bridges' home address, current address, and they got an address, but it wasn't correct. So they sent a couple of cops to this address. Wasn't Trajan Bridges' house. So then they're like, well, that wasn't it. And they're like, the university doesn't have anything current. And they're like, and then you hear a cop, just chime in, check with the athletic department. I bet they got it. And so that's when they call, Benny Wiley, and that's when it was like 10:30, and that's when Lincoln Riley, he's sitting at home, just trying to probably just put his daughters to bed. Maybe he's having a beer or something, getting ready for bed or whatever he does. Who knows what Lincoln Riley does?
It's like anything in life. You never want to get a phone call from a number you don't recognize after like 9 o'clock. Maybe even earlier than that.
I think say, well, for me, that's 24 hours a day. But
do the telemarketers end
especially bad late at night.
The telemarketers, they end at 9?
I don't know. I feel like they call all the time, but you never want to get a phone call from a Cleveland County number, especially. I guess it'd be 405. All of it would be. But it's like getting the dreaded phone call.
You think it shows like Norman Police Department?
I bet they don't even call Lincoln's cell phone. I bet he has a red phone at home. It's like the phones
Yeah, I'm sure they called
like the
Benny
Oval Office
and
or
then
something.
Lincoln just knows if Benny is calling me at 10:30 at night, it's bad.
Yeah.
So that was what I was thinking about. It's just like what type of a holy shit moment that would be for Lincoln Riley to go through that. Not that I care. He gets paid well to go through that.
The key
I'll
tip
answer any
on a
phone
bad
call for
phone call.
$7.5 million.
So true. If the number ends in like 00, there's a problem. Like Norman PD is like the final four is 1600. Like anything like that, you're like, that's not luck of the draw. Like they somehow got an easy number to remember. It's not like ours that ends in 4s and 3s. 00, you're in trouble. Like this call is ultimately bad.
I never thought about that. So anyway, the night goes along, and then they identify Seth McGowan as another suspect. And again, as we sit here, it's about 12:38 on Wednesday afternoon. There are no charges. There are no warrants. Nothing has been decided on this. It's still an open investigation, still active. And I wrote this on the board yesterday. Look, this is what I hate about this stuff is I put something out there and then you get some lawyer trying to poke holes into it. It's because that's what lawyers do. Like my best friend is a lawyer, and when he went to law school, every weekend was just me with a bunch of guys sitting at a table who are arguing with each other. That's what they like to do. So I get it.
There's just not a whole lot of information.
But it's just like, I talked to somebody, source close to the police department. They said, well, here's the deal. The victim is not willing to press charges. And so they have to, basically get the DA to make the charges. Like, it doesn't mean that because he won't press charges that they're not going to get charged with something. It's just, it's making this thing longer. The process is just getting longer and longer because the DA's office is dealing with a big murder trial right now. And in a high-profile case like this, you got to think that Greg Mashburn wants to see the details of this case. If you're going to bring charges against two OU football players, two guys that are major OU football players, you're going to kind of want to see the details.
Yeah, the whole thing, it's just so hard to talk about because we don't really know we know what happened, we think we know what happened, but we don't really know what happened.
There's not been
there's just so much out there.
Report made.
It's a wild story to begin with.
If there's no charges.
It's a wild story to begin with, just knowing that the victim in this case, or quote unquote the victim, I guess you could call it a drug dealer. I don't know.
I think it's just a weed man. There's a difference between a drug dealer and a weed man.
By the way, I have a major problem with there's like 1,000 dispensaries anyways. Why are we find your weed somewhere else?
I went to Campus Corner the other day. I called Eddie. I had to call Eddie to tell him how dumbfounded I was. Like everything, and we all know COVID, restaurants have shut down, and Campus Corner as it is, most people, unless you live in Norman, you have no fucking clue how to park on Campus Corner or where to go or what tokens are, where you get the tokens. Like, it's a very confusing situation. So I could see how restaurants have struggled, and a lot of them have shut down. But what's happened on Campus Corner is every restaurant that is shut down has been replaced by a fly-by-night dispensary. It's unbelievable. And it's not like they have these, really cool. Like the first dispensary that opened up on Campus Corner, it had these really cool green LED lights and this nice neon sign outside. And it looked like an Apple store for weed. I mean, it was just very fancy. The ones they're opening now are just a guy, a counter, and a chair with a vinyl flag kind of hanging outside, just draped onto the building.
The big winner in all of this is probably Homeland parking lots. Nobody has to meet in a parking lot to meet a guy anymore.
That really helped Homeland, didn't it?
I think it did. There was so much that went on in Homeland parking lots from like 2003 to 2000.
Would you go in and get your pre-munch before you bought? Is that how it helped Homeland?
I don't know. My friends usually did it. I never did that.
Mom. But isn't that kind of like getting a DUI now?
What?
Criminal activity around marijuana? Like, you can get an Uber. If you're drinking, just don't get in your car. Get an Uber.
Sure.
Or a Lyft.
I could see that, yeah.
If you want to smoke marijuana, go get a medical card and go to every dispensary that is in town.
You have to be from the state to get one here in this state.
Do you?
I'm pretty sure. Oh. I think, or at least you have to claim Oklahoma residency within like 2 years or something. I have no idea. Maybe that should be part of the. Maybe that should be part of the welcoming process at like Camp Crimson.
Maybe
everybody applies for a medical marijuana card.
Maybe instead of trying to chase the Women's College World Series out of our state, we need to be passing legislation that keeps football players from robbing people.
You say the word transition around anybody right now, and my God, they're going to be coming out of the woodwork from Southeast Oklahoma. You used to just be able to get them out by like putting a little meth in front of them.
God. Eddie is in rare form today.
Is it like? Is that a problem?
I mean, it's just the whole situation is insane. Like, I mean, we're literally sitting here talking about two guys that
problem. But I mean, I'm saying about the OSSAA thing.
Oh yeah, they're idiots.
Has there ever been a guy? Has there ever been a Juana man in the history of Oklahoma sports?
No, I don't think that there has been.
Did the OSSAA come out and say no one has ever had to use this rule?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I guess I have no opinion on the matter. It doesn't really.
Did our legislators like see like the NCAA did that in Georgia, and then they were like, oh well, we're gonna.
Again, I don't know if they have the internet down in Southeast Oklahoma, so how could they see that?
Speaking of states where I'm sure it's a big problem, Georgia, I'm sure that's going on a lot. Like, it's not, none of this legislation is happening anywhere that it's going to happen more than, I don't know, once a decade.
Well, it's like the NCAA came out and said, yes, we will allow trans athletes to compete in our sports. And then all of a sudden, it's just like all the states, the super, red states are like, oh, we can't allow that. If they're going to, like, we can't allow the super soldiers to start forming. Just settle down, Jean-Claude. All right?
That's a great movie.
Didn't they stab someone in the eye at some point with a knife?
I thought that was every Jean-Claude
movie. He just kept going.
Movie.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
feel like that's one of those movies that was on like a Sunday afternoon, but it was on for like 5 years on a Sunday afternoon.
It had the 4 p.m. TBS spot.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so back to what I'll stop taking us off track. Back to the two alleged thieves.
Well, it's just such a. I mean, they're suspended. I guess that's the number one thing to say on this thing. And I don't know. I've kind of said my 2 cents on the board. If it was up to me, I'd probably tell them both, thank you, but you probably just need to move on.
Your services are no longer needed.
Yeah. And it's not as much as, whether there's charges pressed or not. It's just continually putting yourself in a bad situation at some point. Like, they're lucky that nothing happened in that house or wherever this happened at, that somebody wasn't seriously injured or shot or whatever. At worst, killed. I just feel like if you don't take action now, you're almost delaying the inevitable as far as does this happen again, and now you're having to answer for, God forbid, a homicide or something else. And I know that's extremely drastic, but when you have guys that this isn't necessarily like, if it was somebody, and I'm just throwing a name out there, like a Caleb Kelly, you'd say, well, this is an isolated incident, good kid by every standard out there. I'm going to give him a second chance, and he's probably going to learn from this.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with a guy like Trajan Bridges.
Caleb Kelly into the bus, by the way.
Well, I was trying to think of the most like wholesome person.
Come at you.
I was thinking about it's the most wholesome person on the team. That was the example I was trying to give. But like, with Bridges, it's not like he's helped himself any. And I hate to look at it that way because I was so outspoken with the marijuana thing a year ago, which I don't think is a big deal.
But the one thing that this does do, if you're Trajan Bridges, and he did do this, it basically cuts the legs out from under Lincoln Riley on any stance that he had.
Absolutely.
Yep.
In regards to the NCAA and what they do to punish players. Because it's like, oh, you stood up for him, and then he went out and robbed somebody.
Yeah. It just doesn't. And I think that's, if I'm Lincoln Riley, that's the thing that would piss me off the most is the fact that I went out and basically stood on a ledge for you and you pushed me off.
I stuck my neck out for you and you chopped it off.
Yeah.
It's a shitty deal. I mean, we're kind of past the point of saying, I hope this didn't happen. I hope it wasn't them.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people out there that, just don't believe that he could put himself in this situation. But the reality is, I mean, given that we don't know exactly what happened, we have a pretty damn good idea.
Until there's a police report, yeah. I mean...
And everybody that you've talked to, and I'm sure that you guys have all heard the same, it's like, there's not really a whole lot of excuses. Like, you put yourself in this situation, the police detained you, you can't say that you weren't at home, and this is a case of misidentification or something, right?
Yeah, it may have gone worse than you thought it was going to go, but you knew you were somewhere you shouldn't have been.
If you're Trajan Bridges, especially.
Especially, yeah, absolutely. And
like you could have been a starter and you could have put 1 year underneath your belt and maybe gone to the NFL next year.
Here's the worst.
What are you doing?
Here's the worst.
It's disappointing is what it is.
Look, I understand. We've just kind of let fans have their say what they want. Here's the take that you need to avoid, though. This is the worst take that you can possibly have, which is, well, you can't let them go because then they're just going to end up at SMU playing. Like, if they're going to play, you might as well give them a third chance and let them play here. That's not a redneck voice.
Yeah, I think it's almost looking into the future and trying to prevent something from happening or just avoiding the possibility of something happening to where it then comes back on you directly, the head coach, in a sense of, like, it's almost I don't want to say it's bad PR, but it's bad PR.
You can't have win at all costs mentality, Art Briles.
And let's be honest, I don't know if Bridges or McGowan's done enough that on the field to be given that opportunity. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I guess you in a loose kind of affiliation with what happened with Mixon and Pickleman's. It's like, and he hadn't even been on the field at the time, but.
And I don't know how this is. Like, I
probably
think
a terrible way to look at it.
No, I think it's a good point because I feel like, in the Mixon situation, there were a certain segment of the fans, I think, that were just like, I wish he wasn't here. I mean, like, as good as he is, it's just kind of embarrassing. Like, I would say that's a small segment. But then you get the ones that just, like the dude and his son that are there holding up signs everywhere he goes. Like, it's just like you get all these extremes. And I think there has to be, you have to say something for fans that are just like, look, we don't want this here. Like, I don't want this representing my university. And I think there are like, when we put this on the board, Eddie, you were like, wow, I'm surprised how well this is going. And now you've had some of the win at all cost people pile in there.
Which I get. You're going to get that.
You're going to have that. But I don't know. I was just raised around a bunch of people, especially coming off the Switzer years, where you just did not want to go back to that mentality, that win at all costs mentality. And that's when people start talking about bagmen and all this stuff. And it's like, as long as Joe Castiglione's at OU, it's not going to be that way.
No, it's not. And, I think the other side of it, too, is just, the football team is probably the biggest thing out there as far as a graduate and thing that represents the university or represents whoever. And, like, I don't give a damn if the guy's smoking weed. I remember what it's like in college. I remember being around football players in college and what people were getting into. But at the same time, it's like, it's such a different level of bad when you're talking about robbery or guns just in general being involved, allegedly. I don't know. That's where I kind of go, like, there's some things that you just can't do. And believe it or not, I believe that probably armed robbery is not one of them. Unless you're a 5-star ready to win the Heisman Trophy for 4 consecutive years. And I don't think either were ready to do that.
So there is a line that you'll cross.
Yeah, like if Adrian Peterson wants to come back and commit a couple armed robberies, hell, I'll help him.
So in other words, Parrish Cobb just wasn't good enough.
You said it, I didn't. But I will say, like,
Eddie will carry the goods for Adrian and make sure that he doesn't take the beef if it goes down.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'll call.
That's why I was in school.
Eddie will call in a tip on himself so he can so they can find the stolen goods. And
I'll figure out
him.
I'll figure out a way to pass a polygraph test.
Adrian's like, the heat's coming down, Eddie. I need you to go ahead and incriminate yourself.
All right, man. I'll do it.
I'm telling you, we can find some people that'll take the fall.
I'm sure.
There's plenty of them on the boards.
But I also think that, like, a lot of people think that, kind of like I do, just in that it's become a common occurrence for one of the individuals, and not common. It just, you can only give somebody so many
up.
Yeah,
you just can't keep up this much. You can't and keep playing football. You're not allowed. And you shouldn't be.
It's not, we got into a fight over at Logie's on Campus Corner. This is bigger than that. It's a lot bigger.
Is this going to put a cloud over Saturday?
I don't think so.
I think, once they're in the stadium, once people are in the stadium and they're playing football.
And that's the other thing. It's
the last thing that'll be on anybody's mind.
I don't think their teammates are stupid in a regard of, like, this is shocking that something like this has happened in a way. Like, those guys are around each other all the time. They know what their quote-unquote character or,
it's like the people saying that Lincoln will lose the team if he gets rid of these two without them being charged.
I think the reverse could happen if you don't do anything and it does come out that some shit went down and it was bad and he allowed them to stay. I think you could find the opposite effect of, like, why is Coach letting these guys get away with this?
What can I get away with?
Right.
And still be here.
Right. That's why I feel pretty adamant that, you can let the process play out as much as you want, but at the end of the day, I think there's really only one option out there.
I'll say this. I think, and I hate saying this because I'm part of it, there's never been a situation like this that is pretty much documented before the result is even out. Like the Joe Mixon thing, you never saw the tape. Like, you just heard that it went down. Like, we saw the tape.
Sure.
Right. Because we got to go to a police station and view it. But it was a controlled environment, and it wasn't. And they told you, if you record this and show it, you will be arrested.
That's when I put my phone down. I was like, all right, well.
No, I took my phone. I took my phone, and I turned it on its face. So, And
I remember how shocking all that was. Just like, you see it one time, it's like, okay, maybe I missed something and didn't see it. And then they showed it like 7 other times. Like, fuck.
Yeah, but you did have a police report.
Yeah, there's just nothing out there. And I think that, that's why there's a lot of people out there that are led to believe that maybe there is something that has been lost in communication as far as what actually happened. But again, just the fact that we're having to talk about it, the fact that they went to buy weed and the cops got called by the drug dealer or whatever.
The weed man. Call him a weed man.
That's a red flag. If you can't go buy a sack by yourself without getting the cops called, you should get kicked off the team.
Well, they didn't get called. They didn't get called because they went to buy weed. They got called to the cops on because they pistol whipped a guy and then ransacked his room and stole a bunch of his shit.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Can't do that.
I mean, does this...
You gotta have rules here.
Does this put a cloud on the spring game?
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does, but it definitely... It's raining a little bit. It's sprinkling.
Sure. I mean, I still want to... I think that... And this is kind of another thing, just as far as the spring game, as far as who actually plays in the game.
Yeah.
I would... There's a number of guys that I want to see. Whether it be Caleb Williams or Justin Harrington. Guys that we haven't seen. Clayton Smith. Or, a shit ton of guys that really have kind of got to prove themselves this year.
Well, look...
Jeremiah Cradell. Or whoever on the offensive side of the football.
I feel like it's been the Eddie and Carey show.
Please.
So let's start with you, Josh. I mean, obviously, you've been talking to people. I've been talking to people. There's a list, I think, of young guys that if people don't get to see them Saturday, they'll be disappointed.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think at the top of that list, I mean, let's just be honest. You're talking about the Williams, the 2 5-star Williams guys, Caleb and Mario. Everybody wants to see them, wants to see what they're about. It's their first chance to really be on the stage in front of most OU fans who, there's probably a few still out there that aren't members of the site and haven't seen the video of them up close. So, you've got guys like that. But, I mean, I think, some of the most interesting guys are at the positions that maybe we've all become, I don't want to say overly confident, but just have a lot of faith in. Wanye Morris, that's an interesting situation. Anton Harrison, is he going to go? Like, there's a lot of stuff that is kind of out there. And then you've got, Latrell McCuistion. I'm very anxious to see what he looks like with Woody Washington and Devon Graham. Like, what are those guys all going to look like at corner? What's Jaden Davis doing? I mean, there's a lot of storylines for all that we expect of this team. There's still a lot of stuff that's up in the air because last year was such a weird season. I don't feel like you had the same amount of information to digest as you do in a normal year.
Yeah, and I don't think we'll see Woody Washington, by the way. He just hasn't done much at all spring. So, what'd you say?
That's my concern, is that so many guys would probably play if it was September. Because it's April, who's really still going to be out there, and how does it affect how Lincoln goes about the way this game is done Saturday?
It was interesting today, Bob. It was the first time you've heard someone heap a lot of praise on Jaden Hazelwood. Cale Gundy, we talked to him. He talked about how he made a ton of catches in practice today.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that's what everyone's waiting for, is for Jaden to make that next step, to put the injuries behind him, put whatever has been disturbing him in terms of his mental state of mind, and just go out there and start doing it. And when you talk about who's got to prove themselves, no doubt Jaden is near the very top of that list. When you're the number 1 ranked receiver, basically across the board, Trajan Bridges, there's a lot of talk. Well, only rivals saw him as a 5-star. Well, Jaden Hazelwood was like the number 1 unanimous across everything. This is the year where he has to do it. He has to become that guy that everyone thought he would be, 2 years ago.
Have we kind of forgotten, or has it been unfair for Hazelwood that he just hasn't been out on the, like, I feel like there's a lot of people that have kind of given up on the guy, but he necessarily, I mean, it's not like he hasn't just not developed or not played. It's been because he's been injured. Like, it's been a little unfair, I think.
For 2020, but I think 2019, there was a lot of whispers that he didn't know how to line up, and he didn't grasp fully what he was being asked to do, and so he wasn't out there as much, and you just haven't seen that growth that you thought you would. And I know the injury set him back, but then when he came back, I thought he would have a much bigger role too. I know it was only a very limited amount of games, but it was just 4 catches. And I thought when he came back, the chemistry between him and Rattler was going to be something where you really noticed that Jaden Hazelwood was back. And even if it was going to be 3 or 4 games, he was going to make his mark. And it really never felt like that.
Yeah, I just don't think he ever got his kind of legs back underneath him, I guess, for a lack of better terms. It just seemed like everybody wants a grade of Jaden Hazelwood through 2 years in Norman, and I almost feel like you just can't give one. It's an incomplete report card right now.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Cale was asked today, and he brought up Jaden Hazelwood, and he talked about kind of his setbacks, which was interesting. I mean, because like you guys said, he came back for that Kansas game, and it was a week earlier than they thought, and something had to have happened.
Well, I think that, yeah, whatever happened, I think that it's pretty obvious that led to his situation with the bowl game. And then he's just, sometimes I think that maybe Hazelwood is probably his biggest problem. You know what I mean? Like Jaden Hazelwood is Jaden Hazelwood's biggest problem. He needs to get out of his way and just let his talent take over almost.
Well, he missed Bedlam because of COVID. We don't know if it's COVID or contact tracing, and so that took away the chance that we thought might be his breakout game, because he had that catch against Iowa State. I still think it was the most competitive catch that any OU receiver had throughout the course of the season. But it was just very weird that it never felt like he was comfortable and ready to be the type of player, as you're sort of saying, just get out of his way and just trust himself that he can go out there and do what he's supposed to do. He's
like a lot of guys on this team. If OU's going to be a legit national title contender, they got to take a step. They got to make a jump. And you start going down the list of guys that are, needing to make a jump. It does kind of make you question, not I guess question, but make you wonder if this is a legitimate national title type contending team. But at the same time, the talent's obviously there. I don't think there's a lack thereof of that.
By the way, one other area I think that's really going to be interesting after what we've kind of been learning the last couple of weeks is watching center, watching who's out there playing, how well they're doing. And Josh, boner alert, Andrew Raym told us today that he's been running as a starting center.
Really pick the position on the field for Andrew Raym and just let him go start. I don't care. He can play quarterback. He can play running back. Whatever you need Andrew Raym to do. But no, I mean, seriously, it makes a ton of sense because, as I've said before, when he was coming out of high school, obviously he played tackle at Broken Arrow, but his length, that wasn't going to be the natural fit I thought he was an interior player. And as a guard, he's not a massive guy. I mean, you look at him next to Marquise Hayes, and there's no comparison. I mean, they're very different body types. You move him to center, where his ability as a technician, his just understanding of the position and leverage and the way he wants to play, I think those things work. And then you add in just how, I mean, this is a guy that just grew up playing around, NFL and college offensive linemen. He understands just blocking and the ideals behind it much better than most guys his age. So, like I said, it almost sounds like I'm waiting to say coach's kid, right behind all this. Andrew Raym is super, super talented. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, he's just really heady. But no, he really is. He makes a lot of sense at center. And I had gotten the impression through his recruitment that this would happen before now, that he would get a look at center before we got to this point. But either way, it makes a lot of sense with, the kind of talk that no one has really stepped up to take that job this spring.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, and yeah, and I mean, I know Josh, you have always been really high on Andrew Raym, and I think I had Bill Haston on this morning, and he was talking about he's still one of the most dominant high school players he's ever seen, and I didn't see him as you and Eddie seemed like you were at Broken Arrow every weekend the last few years, but I mean, I know you were just so high on him more than you usually are on an offensive lineman because we all know you love him the most, so you're the harshest on them.
But when you get a word of not encouragement, Josh, what am I trying to think of? An endorsement from a guy like a Dave Alexander that coached him at Broken Arrow, I think it all kind of comes together and makes sense. And without, Chris Murray added to the fold, I think that wasn't there a lot of people that just kind of figured he was going to be the next guy in line after Creed moved on?
There was. And like I said, I think for a lot of the same, kind of stereotypical reasons I was just talking about, that it just kind of connect the dots. It made a lot of sense. Raym being, like I said, a smart guy that understands the positions well, could really play, Broken Arrow really knew where they wanted him, and they had a good offensive line for most of his career. So he kind of got to pick one spot, or not pick it, but I mean, he was put at one spot and he stayed there. But for everything else, he could have played other spots. I mean, for a lot of schools, he would have moved around and done some different things. But for them, they were confident with where he was and where he was going to play. But this just made a lot of sense to me. And like I said, it kind of had surprised me. And you kind of understood it last year. They were limited. They didn't have a lot of time. They weren't going to be able to run him. Last spring when he enrolled early, you wonder if they would have run these same tests. Okay, we like him. We like him at guard. Let's put him at center for a week and see what happens. Let's kind of mess around with this. They didn't get that opportunity, and then by the time you get around to the fall, he's too young. You can't have him learning 3 different positions if you expect him to play at all during the season. And, he was clearly a key depth guy for them, even as a true freshman. So, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And like I said, if no, and I kind of look at Chris Murray when I say this, but if Chris Murray doesn't step up and take that job, I'd be willing to bet Andrew Raym is your starting center in week 1. Just knowing the kid and knowing his ability, I just feel like he would be really tough to hold off for anybody that doesn't have a lot of experience on him.
I find the center, and I guess just overall the offensive line situation as a whole, and with some of the notes that Carrie you put up as far as maybe they don't feel like it's come along as far. I'm just not worried about it right now. A, because it's April 21st, and B, because I think that they have some good players. They need to get all 5 of those guys out there at the same time, though. And I think it was Gabe or Teddy that also mentioned that it's just a simple idea of, I'm sure adjusting or identifying everything with OU's defense isn't the easiest thing possible when they move around as much as they do.
Hey, Perion, can you take some plays off, maybe?
Right. And that's, I guess there's a lot of people that look at that as an excuse, but I'm not to the point of pushing a panic button with anything that Bill Beatenbow has done.
Iowa State's had a pretty good offensive line, and Perion Winfrey blew them up time. Now, I know he missed the quarterback repeatedly, but you just don't see people running, scot-free through Iowa State's offensive line like Perion Winfrey did last year, in at least in the Big 12 game.
Because Iowa State is a lot of kind of the opposite of what we're talking about with Oklahoma, where there's a lot of personnel you like individually for Oklahoma right now, but it's figuring out getting them all together and on the same page, and all those kind of things. But that to me, that's one of the biggest things, because not only is Murray or Raym or, I know Nate Anderson's gotten some looks at center, all those guys, and, even Ian McIver that, obviously we always kind of end up overlooking, but you look at those guys, not only are they having to go through all the checks and the changes and the moves that Oklahoma's going to make, just like they would on any other Saturday, their defense is moving around pre-snap, all those changes and things they're going to have to do, but they also have to deal with, as soon as I snap the ball, one of the 3 or 4 best interior defensive linemen in the country is right in my face. That's a lot to deal with. And it's not like he's just a big, massive guy. He's a guy that you quickly have to have your hands ready because he's so incredibly quick off the snap.
Josh is trying to get everybody to melt down, throwing Ian McIver out there as a potential starter.
I might melt down. And no offense to Ian McIver.
Who's done a great job as a backup.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You can't tell me that Perion Winfrey doesn't expose him on a daily basis in practice.
Perion
100%.
Throw Joshua Ellison into that mix, Jordan Kelly, any of those guys. If I'm excited to see anybody, I think it would be, just this defense in full.
I want to see Jordan Kelly. We haven't mentioned his name. He's getting a lot of praise.
I'm anxious to see Jalen Redmond. I want to see what he looks like. How is he going to be used? That's the thing that and maybe I've missed it in something, because, I certainly go back and watch all the stuff you guys put together, but, what is his exact role? What is he going to be doing? I know he didn't love being inside, so how do they kind of work around all of that?
He kind of just plays Ronnie Perkins' position, right? Isn't that kind of what he's doing? Playing where Perkins played last year? And then Benito's on the other side?
Well, yeah, kind of, yeah. But, he's... Well, it's
I think I'm
not
crazy.
A defensive end. No. Because you bookend, you would have Perkins and Benito, but then you have someone next to Benito, and he's going to be that guy. So it's not necessarily a defensive end per se, because he is inside, but he is going to be technically on the edge.
Yeah, because Stripling is playing Benito's position now. He's backing him up.
Because because I think you sort of want if Isaiah Thomas will be Perkins initially.
Yeah, and they can do that way. Yeah,
and Redmond and Benito would be your front four.
Talk amongst yourselves. I got ringing doorbells. This podcast is a disaster.
Tell those people to f themselves. That's ridiculous. Coming here during the middle of the afternoon. They know that this is a studio. No, like it's fascinating to me too. And Bob, talking to the defensive guys, it's just like it definitely feels like they're excited to be able to kind of debut what they're doing. We talked to Calvin Thibodeau this week, and I think just the basis of him being able to talk for a minute about 7-8 different guys kind of signifies what that defensive line's all about right now. They have depth. They have guys that have played quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the championship level depth that we just didn't see 3-4 years ago, and it's one of the first things, of course, that Alex Grinch preached about when he got there. It's not about having the top 11, it's about having the top 22, and it's about having that gap be as narrow as possible so that when one person leaves, the next person comes on, there is no drop off, and you finally see it. And I think you also you see the players accepting the fact that it's okay to not play 60 to 70 snaps. It's all right to just do 30, 40, go all out, play as hard as you possibly can, and then know that the person that comes in after you is going to do just as good of a job. Like, you don't have to worry that because you're not on the field, everything isn't going to get taken care of. And I think that's a real sense of relief for the coaches, for the players, because they can just, do everything at max effort every single time. And I'd be like, I got to save myself because I got to be fresh in the fourth quarter, because if it's not me, there's no one else who's going to be able to get the job done.
It's so different from the Eric Stryker Oboe era where they had one pass rusher on the field, and if he didn't do it, and he played every play. Like, remember, we were very critical of Neville Gallimore in his early days because he couldn't be out there for like 80 snaps. And then, that was kind of the thing, but the drop-off was severe as well. But that's the thing about Alex Grinch. He's actually come in and said, no, you don't want to play that many. That's not what we want. We don't want you to play that many snaps.
The ideologies from the previous regime and this regime are they don't really line up.
It's a little bit
along one another.
It's a little bit like, going from Chuck Long to Kevin Wilson in the no huddle. In a way, I mean, it makes you look at defense a different way. It's just a philosophy that you're just like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. Like when you started seeing, Sam Bradford out there running the no huddle from 2007 to 2008, two completely different offenses.
Well, that probably goes back to the way that he was raised and where he was raised, and just kind of the smarts that came along with it.
Yeah, we're not going to see Oboe taken out on a stretcher in Lubbock after that marathon game against Tech. That stuff not going to fly.
Although when they get big games, it's not like Winfrey or Perkins or Benito were really taking snaps off in the Big 12 championship game.
The other ones, they're not having as many snaps too. We're not seeing the 90, 100 snaps of 5 years ago. You're only playing 60, 70 snaps total because of the way the ball control offense, or however you want to phrase it. But we're not. At least the last 2 years, it hasn't felt like that same type of the tempo has been so crazy that no one could stay on the field.
And part of that is just because the offense has not been what it was under Baker and Kyler.
Yep. Sure.
The explosive plays have not been there in spades. Is that racist?
My radar didn't detect it, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I don't know where in spades where it comes from. It's probably definitely more racist than wet game. Behind the ears.
Probably that stupid-ass card game. Never played spades.
I don't even know. I think I know how to play spades, but I'm not sure. I bet Josh knows.
I suck at it. I'm terrible.
Absolutely do not know how to play that game.
Is it a racist card game? Is that why nobody plays it?
I've learned to play gin. Very strong at gin.
I learned to play gin after watching The Flamingo Kid. By the way, what nicely done, Wayne Gretzky, on that wife.
From the card game of bridge, in which spades is the highest suit, perhaps influenced by phrases with similar meaning, in spadefuls or in spate. So that's your little "we're not racist" this week.
Okay. Good to know. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, but you guys mentioned it. We haven't really talked about it. Caleb Williams. I mean, one of the biggest things that you want to see Saturday. Eddie got a little smirk on his face. I don't know what.
Oh, I just think it'd be funny if he didn't play in the spring game. Like everybody wants to go see him and be like, well, he had he had a little bit of a hamstring issue on Thursday, so we're going to go ahead and hold him out, but we're going to throw out a kid from Penn State, Micah
Bowens.
God,
I forgot his name.
That kid's going to be the most forgotten guy on the entire team. Sorry.
Wow.
Sorry. Well,
Even Eric Bailey forgot him, for crying out loud.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like it. Because Caleb and Spencer have this aura about him, it's like, I feel bad. We're going to forget about Micah Bowen. I'm going to make an oath that I will never forget about him.
Well, I mean, Saturday is the day when Caleb Williams makes his march to the starting quarterback job.
Right.
Sure. That's the thing that's not going to happen.
That's tongue-in-cheek. I mean, Josh hadn't taken a shot at a former employee today, so somebody had to. Not a former employee, but...
Thank God, not a former employee. No.
Wow. Okay, so bigger shot than me.
Yeah, that's a pretty good jab right there.
No, but I mean, look, all I continue to hear is Caleb Williams is legit. And to me, that's surprising just because it's spring. He hasn't been here. And if he's impressive, that's saying something. Because I don't know that... I mean, look, what's weird is this is Spencer Rattler's first spring. He didn't come early. He got canceled last year. But normally you don't hear
season got canceled. He didn't get
crazy
canceled.
Stuff
about you got to clarify that in 2021.
Freshman quarterbacks in spring.
No, I mean as advertised, I think. I guess that necessarily shouldn't be a surprise either. I mean, not really asking him to do just a whole hell of a lot.
I wonder is Brock Vandegrift, is he doing spring football at Georgia?
Yeah, he played in the spring game, I believe, last week.
Last week, yeah.
The one thing I will say, and it's kind of funny, we're talking about Caleb Williams, when Gundy went on and on this morning during our Zoom session, just as far as the possibilities of, or the trajectory of Spencer Rattler and him being among the kind of the all-time names when it comes to the quarterback position at Oklahoma as of late, whether it be Heupel or White or Bradford or, Mayfield or Murray.
He's got a chance to put himself in that conversation this year. But
it feels like he has the locker room this year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, he definitely controls that team. And Kale even kind of slipped up, said, called him a team captain. He's like, oh, yeah, I voted on that. I shouldn't say that.
Good problem to have, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if he feels comfortable enough to be able to do that, I think that kind of speaks volumes, doesn't it?
I think it just shows, like what you said, that he has this team. This team is his. I don't know if Caleb Williams sees it that way.
I guess that kind of brings you to the next... Well, I mean... I think Caleb Williams is ready to...
I hope Caleb Williams doesn't see it that way.
I think Caleb Williams is, at least from what we learned in the recruiting process and what we've seen as far as the way he presents himself on social media, and I know that I guess that's kind of a bad example, but I think he is well aware of his standing.
I was always
while
surprised.
Also being competitive enough to want to be able to take that spot. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing. I was always kind of surprised that it seemed like Kyler and Baker got along as they did, but they had to because Baker was just so damn good. Kyler thought he was better than Baker.
Sure.
Well, but I think he also could watch Baker and say, shit, that's the best quarterback in the country. What am I doing?
I think to a certain extent, it helps that you have a personality like Baker's too, because he's so, I don't know, warm, welcoming, whatever you want to, just a great teammate.
Yeah, he's a dude.
But you want to have that, I don't know, competitive kind of hate each other spirit when you get out to the football field. And I think that they were able to turn that on and off.
You just don't want it to get to where it's just constant shit talking and demeaning and
right. Yeah, you don't want it to divide people, but I think that at the same time,
have some fun with it.
Yeah, and we were talking to the linebackers about that, and I think Deshaun White and Caleb Kelly said as much, just as far as what they have in the inside linebacker room, that they are able to push each other and coexist, I guess, if that's the best way to say it.
The problem with the quarterback position is you're not flip-flopping starters.
Sure.
Unless you're Steve Spurrier.
You need one guy. And I Spencer Rattler's a starter. I don't think there's anybody.
No.
I do think it's more interesting once you get past Rattler, it's everything around him. They have plenty of talent on that side of the ball. It's about how it all comes together, and that's going to be fun to see over the next 4 or 5 months before the season starts, because there are questions, and Kale said as much this morning. There are questions about wide receiver and what's going to happen there, whether it be Hazelwood or, Weiss hasn't been able to do much. It sounds like Marvin Mims has had a good spring. Drake, same thing.
Into the portal.
And do they make a run at the Mike Woods kid from Arkansas?
Josh, any thoughts there on Mike Woods?
Yeah, that's something that, guys, we've watched it all happen, with Eric Gray, who we're hearing all these great things about, and obviously is a guy we all want to see on Saturday. But there was kind of a hesitancy when he was being recruited. That even within a week of him actually announcing his commitment, I was hearing Oklahoma's not 100%. He's a guy that they want to take, that kind of thing. Almost kind of wanting to see if anybody else was going to come into the portal, kind of thing. But with Woods, it's been a very different story. I mean, almost immediately I kind of checked in with some people, and there was a very clear, yes, Oklahoma is interested. They wanted to take a look. And then I got in touch with some of our sources around Arkansas and was told that this whole thing has been very strange from their side because there's no clear reason. He's come out and been very open, like Sam Pittman, likes the receivers coach. So no one's quite sure what's happened to kind of facilitate this move, but that it sounded early on like Oklahoma and Florida were going to be the kind of two primary players in this. And I have talked, to kind of take it a step further, talked to some people around Florida, and it just didn't sound like Florida either thought they had the room to take Mike Woods or what they were going to do there. So just, based on some preliminary conversations, it seems very good for Oklahoma if they choose to offer him that spot, which makes all the sense in the world, especially with this Trajan Bridges situation. But again, Oklahoma looks to be in a good spot if they want to go. And this is a guy that's been productive, averaged almost 20 yards a catch last year in for Arkansas, a team that was not exactly proficient offensively. So you'd have to think Oklahoma could do some interesting things with him, and he could find a role.
He scored a touchdown in the spring game Saturday. That's how recent he was a part of things for Arkansas.
Get this, 48 hours before he enters the portal, Arkansas's football Twitter account sent out a picture of him sitting on the bench, like the country's going to have to deal with Mike Woods. I talk about coming out of nowhere, and then 48 hours later, he's in the portal.
What happened? Does anybody know?
I don't think so.
There was a disagreement with Coach Guyton, the receivers coach, but Woods has definitely tried to downplay that on social media in the last 24 hours.
I guess
beyond that, I really have no clue.
I guess that's why, and let's remember we're talking about the Arkansas fan base and how batshit crazy they are. But I guess that's why there's been a lot of speculation that they feel like tampering has gone on. Is that, I guess, why?
I think that'd be pretty natural for a fan base.
Sure. But, I mean, again, we're talking about Arkansas fans, so.
You can have that smoke. I want none of it.
Bring it on. Hillbillies.
Carries the Nebraska.
I want no part of Nebraska fans or Arkansas. Huge fan bases ruining my timeline. I'm just not interested in that anymore. It was fun, but it gets very unfun.
I want all that smoke.
You've graduated, Kerry.
I'm getting wiser in my old age. I am. I'm getting away from politics, and I'm not ripping on Rex Burkhead for no reason. other than to be a shithead.
Super Bowl champion.
He was. Mighty fine Nebraska Cornhusker. Should have a statue. And I'm not even joking. The way things are going there, a Rex Burkhead statue is deserved.
Yeah, that might be the best thing that they could do right now is just build a Rex Burkhead statue of some sort.
Who else? I mean, other than Ndamukong Suh, who else are you going to build a statue of in the last 20 years?
Lawrence Taylor.
Well, 20 is Eric Crouch. Say 15.
What were the brothers' names that would wear the cropped off? Winstrom?
Peters brothers.
Or Peters.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Peters, but yeah, Winstrom came to mind.
The Peters were the crazy ones.
Yeah, I like them.
They were insane.
I don't know if you want to say it. You might want to take that back, or you might get canceled. They were insane for bad reasons, like rapers.
Oh, really?
Well, one of them.
I retract that statement then.
I mean, Lawrence Phillips is the worst of all time.
Right.
But I mean, since post Eric Crouch, I mean, they've had I guess they did have the Prince of Makamara guy that was in the NFL for a long time.
Sure.
And Ndamukong Suh is still in the league. He's been one of the best. And Rex Burkhead.
Blue blood.
That concludes our Nebraska pod.
My God, can that really be true? Have there not been any more notable Nebraska players besides those three?
Haven't they had a wide receiver? Maybe had a cup of tea?
A cup of tea, maybe, but...
And yeah, I mean, that's not what you expect from Nebraska.
Sure.
Was it their receiver? Was it a receiver from Nebraska that took out Roy Williams in the Oklahoma drill on Hard Knocks? Wasn't that a guy from Nebraska?
Andy Janovich is from Nebraska.
A kicker?
Fullback.
Okay. So, okay.
Nebraska hasn't had a first-round pick since 2011. Prince Amukamara.
There you go.
It's going pretty well for
Prince
him then.
and Sue. Yeah.
Okay, there was one name you mentioned there, and this, I want to wrap up the spring preview here. Here's where Saturday sucks, where it could get really bad, is if they don't play Kennedy Brooks and Eric Gray gets very little action. That will suck. Because everybody wants to see those two guys run the football.
I mean, I'll say it sucks if we don't see people that we want to see, like any of the transfers, any of the freshmen. If it's just a bunch of guys that, got into the game against Dan Mullen's Florida JV squad.
You want to see Latrell McCutcheon. You want to see...
Right. I want to see everybody.
I want to see... I just want to see a little bit of Justin Harrington.
Absolutely.
Just to see him run around.
That's a good one.
Absolutely.
I will give 2 Kennedy Brooks carries for every one Eric Gray carry I can get. I know what Kennedy Brooks is. I don't need to see any of him. He is the player he is. He's a good one. Give me the Eric Gray. I want to see if all this hype, all this stuff we've been hearing is real.
Well, you know what's going to happen. I mean, we might get to see some of these guys, but with the inability of 2 offensive lines to be able to go out there and even get through spring practice, just the practice portion of it, it's going to be sloppy. I think people should just be prepared to, there's going to be a lot of people, I guarantee you, that come out of the spring game saying, well, Oklahoma can't run the ball. It's happened again. And I'm just already preparing myself for that to happen. We know that's going to happen. It happens every year.
Anybody gets hurt, that game's going to change in a hurry, too.
Sure.
I think of Pat Field's tackle on Sermon a couple years ago.
Sure.
Wasn't that Bob's last active duty as a head coach?
No, because Fields was 2018 class.
Oh, okay.
He was a mid-year guy.
How quickly does the Bill Bedenbaugh is on the hot seat conversation start on the Crimson Corner?
It's already started.
It's already started, yeah.
Saturday afternoon.
All it took was Grimlock saying that he, which I'm not ripping on Grimlock, but Grimlock did the standard, I know some people who think they should be starting and they're upset. That's every football team every year.
There's 85 of every roster.
On every roster, there's 85 of the. Well, there's not 85. There's 85 minus 22. So that's 60.
Well, the 22 thing they should be starting.
3. Well, the 22 that are starting, they're not bitching because they're starting. But the other 63,
Okay,
the other 63 are like, I should be starting.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And look, Bill Bedenbaugh coaches hard. But I'll say this, Bill Bedenbaugh has never had the transfer issues that a guy like Mark Mangino had back in the day, where he just ran guys off on a weekly basis.
No, that is true.
He couldn't build it too deep.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just not worried about it. And maybe I'll push the panic button when it's too late, but I feel like they need it's as simple as getting 5 guys out there that can work together for more than a week without having somebody have to get out of the lineup because they get nicked up. I just don't think that they've had that opportunity. Well, and even when you go back to the center position, it's like I still think that Chris Murray's going to somehow work his way into the 5. Maybe it's not at center.
Well, that's kind of what Andrew Raym was talking about today. He's like, look, we're pretty confident we've got dudes in the middle. And we're going to find 3 guys.
It's going to come together. They just need to be able to work together. I mean, I think that 2 things you look at last year's group, it's like, yeah, they were overweight. Tyrese Robinson, Marquise Hayes have said as much. And then you look at just the inability to have 5 guys out there playing together. That's the most important thing on an offensive line. Everybody says that.
We know that Tyrese Robinson had a down year last year. But even if you say he's questionable, you've still got Marquise Hayes. You've still got Andrew Raym. Robert Congle has played a lot of football. He could be a center. He could be a guard. Chris Murray could be a guard if he's not a center. They're going to be fine inside. Now,
and I can hear people yelling at the whatever listening device they're on right now saying, well, and they list off all the times the Bedenbaugh's played the wrong guy. At the end of the day, he's gotten it right, hasn't he?
Absolutely. It kind of solves itself. I mean, the Ben Powers thing is the one that solved itself.
Sure.
And that was because Cody Ford broke his leg.
I just think...
And yes, how did that work again? Did Samia slow? How did they make all that work? I'm trying to remember because Ford was he was a guard. That's right. Never mind. I'm thinking of the next year. Yeah. Yep.
He didn't move till tackle till his last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was somebody. It might have been Alex Dalton or somebody that was playing, or it was somebody before they tried Powers at that TCU game, and then it all clicked.
Yeah, because Dalton had started that year before against Houston.
That's the same year.
Was that? Yeah. You're right. You're right. I'm sorry.
Houston then lost to Ohio State, and that's when he broke his leg.
Yeah.
So they lost. They won. They lost. They started out 1-2, and then they went to TCU.
Yep, and they're down 21-7.
They had 2 big turnovers. I think they had like a pick 6 or something like that to start. Or Baker had an awful start.
Yeah, I think I might have fired Lincoln Riley at some point during that first quarter.
And then Samaje Perine just was unstoppable all of a sudden.
I think that's where the hate developed from Gary Patterson's side.
It's where Dede broke out.
Yeah.
The disappointing thing for me, guys, along the offensive line is I really thought we would start to hear some Stacey Wilkins stuff. Like I thought if there was ever a time, it was this spring because it was there. You know, we knew about Wanye missing some practices, Anton Harrison making a move. You know, like there was all these things that just said, man, it's there for the taking. Go do it. And I mean, I can say without qualification, I have not heard his name once this spring.
Yeah, and I was going to put it like a qualifier on that too, Josh, because I was telling Carrie before we got started, it's like I think people feel like if a kid's name isn't mentioned or if they hear that, he's not coming along like people want, like there's this automatic, especially during spring, there's this automatic like, oh, well, he's a bust, or yeah, they're at that position. When in reality, it's probably not that situation, but it's even, talking behind the scenes stuff.
You know what
that we haven't heard Stacey Wilkins' name very much.
You know what a lot of people on the boards, at least, the conclusion they jump to. He's just playing his favorite player, Swinson.
Right, because Bill Beatonbo's become known as a lovable character that gives into
that
feelings.
Plays favorites.
Sure.
Yeah.
He loves the story of Swenson in Michigan. It's his favorite story.
I think I'm going to start a rumor that he's just
story on Chicago Sun.
He's just auditioning for the Michigan job is what he's doing. When Jim Harbaugh gets fired, Bill Beatonbo would be the next head coach in Ann Arbor.
Now,
oh god, that I could see. I like that.
Yeah, that's good. Now
he'd look good in maize and blue.
Now,
or yellow.
The dead
maize
period
yellow.
is coming to an end, but not before the spring game. So they cannot host recruits, which I'm sure drives Lincoln up the wall. Although there's so many damn spring games that weekend, I don't know how many recruits any one school could bring in. I bet you would have changed it if that had been the case.
I think they'd probably be going on Friday night if that was the case.
But Josh, I know you're putting together a list of players that will be there, and I mean even a list of who is scheduling things when the dead period ends. Let's kind of just let you go over exactly first, starting off with the spring game.
Yeah, and I put up a kind of the first look at what the spring game visitor list would be like. And the thing you have to remember is there's not the normal checks and balances of this thing, because usually I can check with sources, I can check with the kids. Really, at this point, I can only check with the kids because there's nobody giving them a ticket or there's none of that going on. So it's just kids and them getting back to me and, all that stuff. And, guys like ever looking for a ride, all the normal problems are still there, but you also have the aspect of, I don't always know who I should be checking in with kind of thing. So there's a little bit of a scatter shot to the way this is going. But, Oklahoma's put together a decent, they haven't put together, but they are looking to host a pretty good group. I mean, it's not going to be the huge number like you would normally see at the spring game, just because these guys know. I mean, they know, okay, I could come down there now and, convince my mom and dad to make this trip. And I can't see anybody. I can't talk to anybody. I can't do anything really other than go to the game. Or I can wait for the barbecue and then I can go and I can see everybody and be like a normal recruiting event. So you're seeing a lot of the guys I'm talking to are, no, I won't be there this weekend, but I'm coming to the barbecue. Guys like Jonte Cook and Amari Abor, some big time 2022, 2023 guys. But for this weekend, there are a couple of big ones. We'll start in state. Jacob Sexton, the offensive lineman from Deer Creek. Not a huge surprise, obviously not a big drive for him, but he's going to be down there. Always good to have guys like that on campus. Joining him amongst the offensive line, and another guy we saw recently, is Cole Hudson, the offensive lineman from Frisco, Texas. A guy that it sounds more and more the more people you talk to, this could come down to an old-fashioned OU Texas kind of battle for him. And he's coming up with his family, seems very excited about it. And is a guy that, like I said, I've said it over and over again. You talk about a dude that plays football the way Bill Beatonbo wants an offensive lineman to play football. That's your guy. I mean, he is nasty, plays to the whistle, maybe a little past. And I mean, he wants to absolutely punish you. And he's just that kind of dude. So this is big for Oklahoma to get him back up on campus. Really kind of his reintroduction back into all of this. So any of these guys, this is a big step because you're getting them on, to kind of have that first look as the world starts to kind of get back to normal in the recruiting world. The last in the 2022 class of the uncommitted guys is Kip Lewis, the linebacker from Carthage that is, probably among OU's top 2 targets at linebacker, and is making his first trip to Oklahoma. This is a first for him. So this will be big. Again, Oklahoma can't do a lot, but good spring game environment, nice weather, a good moment for guys like Agwebu and Asamoah, and that won't hurt OU. So this is going to be a chance for a big weekend. You also have Cam Williams coming in, the offensive lineman from Duncanville that Eddie and I saw at Under Armour a few weeks ago, and it's just a mountainous human being. Just, again, very stereotypical Bill Beatonbo kind of guy, just kind of blots out the sun. And then in the 2023 class, the only guy I have confirmed already is Luke Hass, the big tight end from Bixby that is, a top 50 guy in the country in the first Rivals 100 rankings for his class. So it's a limited group for this particular weekend, but as you start to look forward to the barbecue weekend and guys like Malik Agbo, Ish Harris, Caden Helms, Cole Hudson will be back for that weekend. Jalen Lewis, the defensive back from Tennessee, that is a big time, one of their primary safety targets. That's a guy that I think Oklahoma is really starting to kind of push the pedal on, really trying to get him as part of the class. Gavin Sawchuk, Dane Shore, the big offensive lineman, Jake Taylor. So you're starting to see these things coming together where there are these really lengthy lists. And then you add in all the unofficial visitors, which, I mentioned Jonte Cook, I mentioned Amari Abor. Well, you throw in Brandon Ennis, who is the number 4 overall player in the class of 2023, kid coming from, South Florida. That weekend is shaping up to be one of the better weekends. Forget, I know last year, it's kind of hard to say in the last year or so, but in several years, this could be a very big weekend for OU in the June 18th through 20th barbecue weekend.
It's just amazing. I know the coaches are so glad to have visits back and on-campus stuff, but the competition to get these guys on your campus is going to be incredible. And that's probably something that the barbecue really helps them with.
Oh, it does. Because, this weekend, I know, they're going to be competing with some other spring games. I believe A&M is this weekend, if I'm not getting my weekends mixed up.
Texas.
OSU.
So, that's a lot going on, especially, like I said, when you are considering that OU is going head up with these schools for a lot of guys, and they can't, it's not like, hey, come down and, meet your mom and dad and we'll give you a tour. They can't do any of that stuff. These guys are just coming to hang out, just to see what's there, kind of see what it's like, be amongst the fans. And so, you don't want to ever read too much into that, but I think Kip Lewis coming in this weekend is a huge, I think it says something because he could go anywhere. He's talking to all of these schools and he's going to make the trip up to Oklahoma, which is, from Carthage is no small trip. He's coming from East Texas. So for OU to be able to get him to come up, again, Brian Odom, I think is becoming one of the underrated recruiters on this staff. He's not, I think because he's not always in on the 5-star guys that everybody knows. People kind of assume, maybe he knows what he's looking for. He's going after a certain type of guy. And Kip Lewis, again, I think he and Ish Harris are kind of OU's top 2 guys, and they fit a mold. They are long, athletic guys that can really run, and, that's what we all understand Oklahoma wants at that position.
Do we know who he's coming up with, Kip Lewis?
No, I don't.
I just didn't know if the head coach was
family or.
Yeah, I just didn't know if Carthage head coach is coming up. I know his daughter's at OU and their family of Switzer, so I didn't know if that was. Let's make an easy trip up to Norman that way.
Interesting.
It would make all the sense in the world.
What's the guy's name?
But
Scott Surratt.
He has not specified.
I think it is.
That sounds right. All right. Outside of that. Anything else you want to hit on, or anything you want to preview coming up and scoop on Friday?
I don't know that I have any. There's some weeks where I'm kind of backlogged and I've got a lot of different stuff. This week it's going to be more about talking to these guys, kind of, what are they looking for? What do they want to see? Because what are they going to get out of this weekend? Because like we just said, there's not the normal amenities and normal kind of step-by-step weekend that these guys are going to go through. So, what are they going to do? What are their parents going to be interested in? Are they going to go see some of the academics facilities? Are they going to go around and see some things, or is it just going to be, I came to the game and I went home? And I think with those answers, you're going to find some real feeling for where they are with OU. Is this something I'm seriously looking at? Or was this a fun weekend to go up and kind of watch a game and just feel like, hey, I'm being recruited again?
All right. Josh, I will give you the option if you want to leave for women's basketball talk. Actually, not women's. You have that option available to you.
As I told you guys, I've been watching a lot of Drake basketball. I've been crunching the film, really getting a feel for what the offensive sets are going to look like. Really, really feel like I'm getting tuned in to this basketball site that we've now decided to run. I'm really
We're a
into
basketball
it.
pod now. Yeah.
Yep.
So Josh has got to either shape up or ship out. So he's on the women's.
I never knew as a co-owner of Soonerscoop.com, my job could be in trouble for not knowing enough basketball. This was not in the fine print.
Yeah, you weren't into softball talk either yesterday.
These two dragged me into softball yesterday. I had no idea. I didn't even know it was on the SEC network.
Just a disappointing program. They lost yesterday.
40 in a row is gone. Just cancel the season. Might as well just.
Did Barrett Sally? Did he put Patty Gasso on the hot seat yet?
I put her on the hot seat. Are you kidding me? No, that was a stupid graphic, too. I get what he's saying. Like, sure, there's pressure, but there's pressure every year. I don't know why it was part of that group.
But even his explanation didn't make any sense. Do we really want to say the pressure to win a national championship is the same as the pressure to keep your job?
Sure.
Like one is how you make your living, and one is the mountaintop. Like, I've got to get to that. It's not the same. It's just not. There's any of us like, okay, we could go do whatever the top of our profession is or what we want to do in our professional life, or we get to keep our job. I know which one would concern me more if I miss.
It's kind of like saying Nick Saban's on the hot seat if he doesn't win it all this year.
Dude, that's the expectation.
I don't know. With the Alabama folks, he really might be on the hot seat if he doesn't win it this year.
I did watch a little of their spring game.
Delivered one of the greatest audio clips of all time.
I did not know that.
Kool-Aid, don't walk on the goddamn field. It's awesome.
I didn't know that the. By the way, there's another Latu out in the world. But did you know his brother plays at Oklahoma State? The tight end for Alabama, that big dude that had the touchdown?
Didn't realize that, no.
I think that's right. Look up the Oklahoma State roster and see if there's a Latu.
There's a Nathan Latu.
Yeah. That's his
Weak
brother.
side defensive end, Salt Lake City.
Yes. Okay, so Josh, you can either you choose your own adventure right here. We're going to go into some basketball talk.
Oh, it's one of those things where I do want to do it, but I'm just going to sit here in silence.
Okay.
Because I have absolutely nothing to contribute.
Kind of like Bob during interviews today, because he is now a hoopster hipster. He's above football because we're a basketball site now.
Was he like Bob? Now, were you sitting there on the feed just like in a smoker's jacket and like a long cigarette, just like kind of above it all?
Yeah, I was actually playing with Pearl, so my audio wasn't as good. But it's just there's some guys that you have a lot of questions for. But when it came to Robert Conjul and Andrew Raym, it's like once you get past 5 or 6, at this point of their OU tenure, I don't have many more questions. Maybe in the future, but right now, no.
This just took a turn.
It's a shame.
Bob Przbillo is now on the hot seat because he doesn't care about offensive linemen.
Yeah. Bob, I can deal with this basketball agenda you're pushing, but the offensive line hatred, sir, that's too far.
That's
too
far.
Done.
No,
but I think it's been a really interesting week. I mean, was the brothers, they weren't
Tanner and Jacob
Groves, they weren't committed when we did a pod last week, right?
No, they were.
When we were at this point last week, they had 5 open spots for scholarships, and people were seriously wondering if Porter Moser was in over his head to steal a Lincoln Riley thing that's, of course, on the board. But, that 2 weeks into his tenure, is he equipped and ready for this type of job? And 24 hours from Sunday to Monday, and you get 3, and okay, You can calm down. This team, it won't be a
Duke transfer and stars of the NCAA tournament.
Couldn't have gone any better. I mean, obviously they've added some depth, guys that are going to play a whole bunch of minutes for Oklahoma next year, and both Tanner and Jacob, and then obviously Jordan Goldwire. And I like Bob. The Goldwire thing's interesting just for the fact that, and I'm not going to shit on De'Vion Harmon quite yet. We'll probably do that in later podcasts. But like, this team needed a veteran point guard that could come in and kind of run things as everybody gets acclimated to the Porter Moser system, right?
Yeah, because you look at the 2021 class, it's solid. Bijan Cortez, CJ Nolan, Alston Mason signed. But those are 3 freshman guards. You weren't going to ask any of them to try to run the point. I don't feel like Mo Gibson is the answer at point. He's someone who can play point guard, but he's not going to be your number one guy, and that's why Jordan Goldwire was so crucial. And it's someone that he's going to be a point guard, and if you hated what Austin Reeves did at point guard, Jordan Goldwire is not going to be that guy. He's not going to be the guy trying to put up 20, 25 shots and try to score 20 points a game.
The ball's not going to die in his hands.
Yeah, he's going to get other guys involved, and his assist-to-turnover ratio is fantastic, and his ability to play defense, you put him with Elijah Harkless, that's going to just give nightmares to opposing backcourts because they're going to be in their face for all 40 minutes.
Now, where else does OU go from here? I mean, they've got those 3 guys. What is left? I mean, obviously, you lose all your bigs.
There you go.
I mean, you've got to have some bigs. Do you use both those scholarships for bigs?
No, it'll be 1-1, and Tanner Groves checks off a major need in terms of having a big, but you've got to get a second one, and I think I feel it's a pretty clear pecking order in terms of the big and the scoring guard, and I think when you look at the bigs, Bryson Williams, the transfer from UTEP, is the number one option, but there's a lot of ties to Texas. As a former coach going there.
Right.
It feels like the Horns are going to be the ones that end up with him. So then you look at Ethan Shagwa. I think I got that right. He's a guy from Tulsa Union, went to SMU. There's your KT Turner connection, and someone that I think understands that Bryson's going to be the first guy, and if OU doesn't get him, they'll jump in, and then he can be a super senior and provide that 1 year of help in the post. And then scoring guard is interesting because, I mean, we went from having 5 open scholarships to now, realistically, there isn't room for both Jackson Robinson and Bryce Thompson. There just isn't, because of the fact what you need in the post overwhelms compared to what you need elsewhere. You can't take both of those guys, and I think Bryce Thompson is clearly your first option, and you go as long as you can, and you wait for the family to tell them no, and then you maintain the relationship with Robinson the entire way so that if Bryce says no or goes somewhere else, you can jump right back in with Jackson and bring him home. He was a kid from Ada, went to the Aggies. He reclassified because he should have been this class. He should have been with Trey Alexander and Bijan. Instead, he went 2020, and he played a year in College Station, and he entered the portal Monday. The only basketball person he's followed on social media since Monday is Porter Moser, and I've had multiple sources from different angles say Jackson wants to be a Sooner, but I think we have to see how it all shakes out with Bryce first.
It's by the way, does Texas have like more roster spots than anybody in the country? I feel like they're getting a transfer in there every single day. What's going to be bigger, the support staff or the roster?
They're in the running for all of them. So you give credit to Beard. Like, he obviously understands he can't take them all, but he's making sure he reaches out to every single person possible. And then we don't know what Greg Brown's going to do. I know that's been the story of the last 24 hours. So, a lot of things can change, and that might affect Bryson Williams. If Greg Brown decides to stay, does Bryson want to go to the Sooners instead of Texas? So there's a lot of things still on the table here, but I think what OU and Texas have done in the portal is pretty impressive because they had a lot of work to do, and Beard and Moser figured out how to do it in a very short period of time.
If Bryce Thompson and Jackson Robinson both sat there and they both tried to commit, you can't tell them both no, though, right?
Well, then you're kicking someone to the curb. You're kicking one of your guys.
I'll tell them.
Stood with you.
Let me know. Tell me what walk-on I need to send their walking paper. Like, seriously, they would have to.
Well, that's not the walk-on. It's the scholarship.
Okay, well then, who's on scholarship that sucks the least or sucks the most?
Do you want Elijah or Moja?
Is it
Sorry,
Josh
Mo.
Ogaro who stuck with you?
Yeah.
The optics of that would look terrible. Here's guys that are sticking with the coaching change, and now you want Jackson and Bryce, so you're going to kick off. So someone who's going to be there for you.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a tough conversation to have, but I guess you could also fall back and say, I didn't necessarily recruit you. I think that maybe this would be the best way to.
It's been done before.
Seriously, that's cutthroat, and it kind of sucks, but that's the way that you kind of. And by the way, that I've kind of heard that Porter Moser works. I don't know if that conversation would be as tough as we think it is. I've heard he's a little bit of a hard ass, which I think is a great thing.
It is to me the thing that I find most fascinating. There's nothing that really fascinates me about the portal process or the kids, transferring. But to see kids follow people, like as much as like to see, a walk-or and like people to just follow along people that they know, it's been fascinating to me.
Yep. And that's,
because on one hand, you have all these people transferring. On the other hand, you have these people being fiercely loyal. It's a very strange dynamic to be in the portal.
Yeah, I think that's why people maybe Krutwig or Williamson or one of those Ramblers would come with Porter. And, next time we get to speak with Porter, and I think it'll be once the assistant coaches are finalized. There's still that third assistant coach that has not been announced. And once all the transfers are done, I'm going to ask, would you have ever considered taking one of your former players? Because it does feel weird that you walk words with Carlin in Vegas now, or that people are trying to follow, Beard to go to Tech. Like we know all those Texas Tech guys probably wanted to go to Texas as soon as they heard what was going down. So it's been a strange dynamic. I'd love to hear what he thinks about all that.
All right. I think our work here is done. Looking forward to the spring game coming up. We'll have plenty to break down next week from what we see. More, maybe this basketball stuff will have shaken out by the time we're back, and then Josh can talk again. But plus the recruiting weekend and all that, and finding out who ended up showing up and how things went, and then getting ready for recruiting visits again. I mean, that's going to be fantastic. I know Josh is chomping at the bit.
Yes, I need to. Bob and this starring role bullshit, I just can't do it anymore. It is not feeding my ego in the way I need to be fed.
Bob is the star. He's just got to deal with it.
Bob has crushed it.
Oh, there will be a time and place for that, Bob.
I think everybody's done a great job lately. I'm really proud of the work we've been doing on the Scoop. So, also, I would assume this time next week, we'll know something more on the Bridges-McGowan situation.
I mean, I would hope so.
If we don't, just kill me. I don't want to be here next week. If I have to go through another week of this.
I don't think there's a decision that really has to be made right now. I know that you got to let the process take over, but
I think
kind of the way I feel.
I think a decision has been made, and the only thing that
it
can
sucks.
save it is for some information to come out that pretty much clears one or two people. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it matters at this point. Charges, no charges. But we'll see.
It sucks because, again,
Lincoln's got to let it wrap up, though, before he makes any kind of announcement, or makes it official, I would say.
I think we all really, really like the Bridges family. It sucks. It's a bad situation for everybody.
Terrible. Feel terrible for their family. All right. Well, like we said, no charges, all alleged. But let's face it, we're all talking about it, so can't avoid it.
Why are you winking?
Stop it.
Just kidding. I'm kidding. All
right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Unofficial 40. We'll see you guys back here next week, right here on Soonerscoop.com.